friend of mine, Rob Paulsen, who's been on this show, talked about his experience too. And Rob, also a great voiceover artist, Pinky in the Brain, and was diagnosed with throat cancer. And he said he had that same shocking realization, which even above and beyond your own health, you're concerned about now, who am I and what do I do with myself after this, if that's the case?
Yeah. To me, it seemed, and again, we're in entertainment because we do feel, and we use our feelings as a toolkit, basically, is the best way I try to put it to young actors who, I've worked with in the past, or people who ask me what it takes. Is for an actor who takes their craft seriously, emotions are your toolkit and your palette. So you're using them all the time. So and you have to have them sort of available to you all the time. I'm not gifted to be able to just shut it all down. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that emotionally it hit me that I would almost prefer, let's just call them other options, to being left without a voice for the rest of my life.
Right.
And to navigate that darkness. And I joke about that being, the real dark side to go through, and the post-traumatic stress and the anxiety and the depression that anybody who's had to go through a devastating illness feels. It's natural. And our culture likes to treat it now this way, two different ways. One is, yes, let's all talk about it. There's a million commercials on TV for medication about it. And on the other hand, it's still a bit of a stigma. Well, don't mention that you have that. Maybe they won't hire you then, or maybe they won't.
Sure.
So,
and the surgery that was necessary to remove the tumor, it compounds the trauma, because now you're left with if I'm fair to say, a hole in the side of your face.
That was the decision. I had an incredible surgeon, and behind him were a team of other high-end, the same people who make our favorite celebrities look fabulous past their 40s. We're on standby because my lead surgeon did not know going into it at all what he was going to face, because no machinery or tool yet in the medical sciences was able to get past and see what was going on.
Right.
And so I kept being told, we won't know until we're in there. We won't know what we're going to find. And so on top of everything else, but he was savvy enough to make the decision, let me have a team of experts so that if I need extra help, all hands on deck once she's bleeding out and on the table. And I was out for an extraordinarily long time, 10 hours.
Wow.
Which is considered, that's a crazy amount of time to be out, and all other kinds of complications can happen because you're a fragile body,
right.
Once you're...
Just from anesthesia alone for 10
exactly,
hours.
all that stuff. So the decision was, he was able to very cleanly, by medical standards, do a clean job. And he made the decision, there was grafted skin and skin removed from other areas and all that. But for the most part, he decided to leave a hole. It sounds crazy, but it was just a big hole where you could literally see right into the, kind of like you'd only see in a movie.
Madness.
And the reason he did that was that's the healthiest way for it to close up properly and heal properly. Had they grafted over it or bandaged it all up or sewed it up, it never would have healed as wholly or had as much a chance of surviving the surgery.
Wow.
So it was nuts. And I remember a lot of this stuff wasn't shared with me ahead of time. And part of that was his decision. I believe what I've come to learn is so that I would go through with it, because if I'd been told all the possible permeations that I might, that was his thought.
It's not unreasonable. A lot of people wouldn't have been able to bear up under that news.
I don't know. I wish I'd had more prep, but he didn't know what he'd be facing, and that was the decision that was made, and therefore I was left for many months with a giant hole and quarantined just to make sure that it didn't
get infected,
anything bad happen, or sutures break or anything like that. So It was nuts. And I just have to, this is hilarious. I'm going to break the story to say, he's giving me so much courage in telling me this story. I've got Batman face, literally
Batman's
Batman.
Always there for us. Absolutely. Yeah. If you ever need any superhero help, he's right there watching over us.
I don't think better would be Spider-Man, but Batman's awesome.
So now the way you dealt with this and handled this, being a performer, and I hope it's not sexist at this point to say, I think it's got to be worse as a woman too, to have to deal with that, that issue of having that on your face. You dealt with it in a remarkably sort of creative, show busy kind of way, which I thought was just awesome. Can you talk about how you would go out and face the world, given the fact that you still have this thing that's healing on your face?
Oh, I'm like, I want to give you the biggest hug in the world right now. You're doing such a beautiful job with all this. So kudos to you. Yeah. So these were all things that I hadn't considered or thought about going into it. Like the main goal was to survive going into it.
Sure.
And then sort of coming out of it little by little. And that's the other thing is, as a lot of people know, in this culture, in American culture and the healthcare system, you're sort of kicked out. It's sort of like, okay, we're done with the brutal, crazy, bad stuff. And now good luck. And no one hands you an instruction manual. No one really sits down. I mean, I hope there are some cancer hospitals and other organizations that do fill in the blanks for people. I was on such a unique path, and as incredible as my surgeon was and his team was, all of a sudden 2 weeks out of it, it was, I was still seeing him regularly, but no one was sitting me down and saying, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. This is what you need to do. And on top of that, I had the unfortunate truth, as you're pointing out, and that's how I made my living,
right,
was acting and voicing. And now I was left, I was very deformed, unfortunately, and that's not an exaggeration. And it took many months because for the first few, I was just sort of hiding in my home studio.
Sure.
And jerry-rigging whatever I could, doing very little auditioning, having to do several takes for some of my near and dear clients, and then pastiching it all together in the prayer that it would sound okay, and gave up a lot of work as well, and had to turn down callbacks and things like that. And when I did finally start to take on I won't go into it, but I had an obligation to other people for meetings that had been set in motion way before I was even sick. And sort of the Hollywood system is you go in for several big meetings as contracts are being massaged along for development deals and things like that.
You have to put FaceTime in with these people.
Exactly. Ironically, FaceTime. So I maybe it probably was incredibly stupid at the time, looking back, but I felt this incredible drive also to feel alive and like I hadn't just fallen off the face of the earth, to figure out some way to every once in a while still honor those meetings, not for voiceover, but for these production meetings. And the crazy Hollywood story that I think you're alluding to is the fact that I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a lead prosthetic special effects makeup artist for The Walking Dead and that whole series on the East Coast. And he happened to be blessedly on hiatus while this was going on. And at one point I had asked my surgeon several times, please, can I make some of these meetings? People are going to lose their contracts if I can't show up to do my part. And that's not, I don't want that to come off as arrogant, but I had been a key creative developer on a lot of them. And some of them were really trusting me. They were younger and really trusting me to take the lead on some of these big development projects. And so my surgeon finally relented and said, if you use surgical grade tape over it with some gauze, with a special topical solution that I will prescribe for you, literally a compound that fights off all infection, we will figure this out, find a top makeup artist. You're going to have to ride over it. You're going to have to.
So you need to put the gauze and the bandage first and then put the prosthetic makeup on top of that.
Yeah, and then put the regular makeup on top of that.
Wow.
And he was like, if you want to take that on and come into the office to show me what it is first before I approve it, And so this amazing makeup artist sat down with me and came with his giant kid. And I'm scared of all that stuff. I can't go to parties at his house because he's got all of the crazy zombies and monsters that he's done for years on various, and alien. I can't be around it. I can be around Batman. Can't be around that scary stuff. Never could. But he came over to my place and thoughtfully was sort of hold one thing up, hold another thing up, and eventually came up with something and then airbrushed over it. So I had like this crazy layers upon layers upon layers. And my fabulous, amazing hair person put all these extensions here. I have one picture, which I'll dig up for you later. But basically, I looked like, what was that great Peggy? Who was the actress who voiced from Lady
Peggy
and the Tramp?
Lee.
Thank you.
Yes.
You know how like she had...
Sure, yeah.
Or Veronica Lake.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I looked like. I was or Jessica Rabbit. It looked like I was trying to be that. But it really was just this wall of extensions that was helping to cover all that. And so went in, I got approved. You have 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to let you do this for 2 or 3 hours and let's see how it goes. And so I would go out. The makeup artist would spend 2 or 3 hours prepping me. And then I would have these 2 or 3 magical Cinderella hours to go take these meetings. And then I would start to feel it disintegrate and start to feel it peel off. And then I would be like, Cinderella got to get out of here. She's going to turn into a pump.
The clock's striking 12.
Some of the meetings I left a little bit early or somewhat, just would get out of there. And it was nuts. And I look back on it and I go, was that me? Was that me who was doing that? That's insane.
Mm.
But at the time it felt like a solution to
rejoining the human race in a way.
Yeah, and not letting opportunities for other people that had been set in motion.
Right.
It took a long time. Once we were sort of in the middle phase of it having healed up and I was sort of looking normal again, I was timidly going back out into the voiceover world, but and wearing scarves because this was all still needed more surgeries to.
Which leads us to the fact that you did need reconstructive surgery on your face, and that's where you started getting jammed up by the magical, wonderful people in the insurance business, who told you that wasn't really necessary, right?
That's a lot of the messaging that we got.
That's tragic.
Yeah, it was it was unexpected, especially given which health insurance I belong to. And where they get their premiums from. Yeah,
and let's not be coy about it. You're a member of a guild, of a union of performers, of people who make their living with their voices and their faces. And if you're a member of SAG or AFTRA, you pay into this to get your insurance covered by that union, that guild. And then those people tell you, well, no, you don't really need to look better or look normal, or that's an unnecessary expense. We're not going to cover that for you.
Exactly.
That's madness.
And how is it related to your cancer? So again, unexpected. And I kept feeling, and I will probably continue to feel for the next however many years I'm blessed to still be knocking around on this earth, in this form anyway, like I didn't get the instruction manual. I think everybody who's gone through something like this feels, maybe not, maybe there's a few who are just take the other lens of, well, this is what life is. It's a big mess. And I've started to really adapt that lens as well. But I still always felt like nobody told me I could be facing this. Mm-hmm. Like I survived all this and now I'm facing this.
Right.
And then you go one step further and start to look back and go, and all the negligence, all of the times I was told it's inoperable, it's fatal.
Mm-hmm.
I'd leave it alone. I got every version of everything.
You got that from the medical professionals, and then the insurance professionals are telling you, we're not going to pay for the thing you've been feeding into with your money all this time. Yeah. We're not going to take care of you in your time of need, although that is the definition of what we do. I mean, I think you have a point. Shit happens and life can be crazy, and I think we all do have to accept that. But you don't have to accept the unnecessary shit that happens that is strictly created by bureaucracy and corporations and people who are unthinking or unfeeling. I think that is, you can legitimately stand up and rail against that, which I'm glad that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's a term for it, medical bullying. Mm-hmm. And it can be every version of that, just like emotional abuse can look almost like it's love. You know,
yeah.
They say, when someone is working their way through that and coming back from having spent years of emotional abuse, it felt like love at the time, which is why they stayed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, you get a double-edged message a lot of the times. We really have your best interests at heart. We've really taken this under consideration. We do truly feel for you, but unfortunately, it's just not covered. And I think I took that up to a certain point and then said, you know what? You're not sorry.
We're going to change this conversation.
Yeah. And if it takes me, I mean, this literally came out of my mouth at one point. If it takes me coming down there in person with my attorney, and by the way, I didn't have a hired attorney. I had friends, like in LA, I have a friend. I'm like saying this knowing that I may have to go get one. But, if it takes that with me showing you all the scars and the deformity and standing in front of the board of directors and asking them, do you consider this, camera ready?
Yeah, right.
Things I never thought I would ever say. I was raised in a culture that being a female meant a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, that conversation has turned dramatically in the past 20 years. But, I wore my Mary Janes and my white stockings and my, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
A child of the, parents from the 50s.
Be demure was a virtue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least not to be a big mouth and not to be crass or blunt and still fighting. And for better or for worse, it's still mostly a male culture in the upper tiers of most of them who I encountered were all male who were running these hospitals and healthcare systems. And I'm not, it's funny, my social media gal who I'm lucky enough who helps me organize, not get overwhelmed with, because I believe in direct engagement, so I'm always directly engaging. But she's always saying, these are feminist issues. And I'm always saying, I don't think of myself as a feminist. I actually like a dude to open a door for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to be treated like a gal. I like that. But on the other hand, to not be bullied by this assumption that I should then just shut up because I'm a female. Yeah.
And these are human rights issues too, above and beyond gender.
Absolutely.
It comes down to how we're treated as people,
But you did I just want to circle back to it because you also made a good point. Yes, in the culture of Hollywood, certainly in the first part of my career, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, you were expected to be attractive.
Sure. It's hard enough to be a woman in in show business, let alone someone who now has a deformity on her face, which is, would be considered in some cases insurmountable because you're just going to get passed over and they're not going to feel bad about it at all. It's just going to happen.
Or maybe they will feel badly about it, but the camera wouldn't. I'm just, I'm being.
Give them the benefit of the doubt.
It's so awesome these days with Netflix and Amazon and HBO and the 30 million other portals that, now entertainment has blown wide open in terms of specs. I don't see breakdowns anymore, but back when I was an agent, it was all thin, attractive, girl next door. Friends changed the conversation a little bit into now you could be quirky. And I remember that because I was sort of enjoying the first wave of that as an on-camera actress where I didn't have to be a stick-thin supermodel. I could be quirky and adorable. But now I think it's really a lot more wide open in terms of you can have disabilities and be a lead on a TV series.
Right.
You can have certain, that's nice.
But the real good news is that you won, right? You were able to get the insurance company to pay for the corrective surgery that you needed.
First of all, I'm just going to say to the universe, I don't think we've ever won. And I think the moment you think that, the universe goes.
Okay, maybe that was overstating. That's not overstating.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
you were able to get them to do what they should have been doing in the first place.
In some cases, yes. In some cases, it's still, the jury's still out. And in some cases, we were, I was fortunate to have some guardian angels, including a certain journalist at a certain top Hollywood trade paper. Between all of that, we were able to get the conversation moved a bit, and some of the coding did get accepted in. And mostly what I kept saying at that point, because by that point, 2 years ago, I was at least healthy and well enough to be back to making a living and looked mostly, fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky, and I knew that. So my feeling at that point was, I'm going to make I'm going to make sure nobody ever faces this kind of bullying again. And I'm going to go on record. I would start every conversation with any of these organizations, medical or union. We are being recorded, aren't we? I literally would say that. And if they said, I think so, I'd say, I'd like to make sure, please, that this is going on the record. Because then someone could always say, well, we didn't know that, or you didn't mention that, or we had no idea. But I wanted to make sure. I had had friends who were an older generation than me,
Mm-hmm.
who were of the generation of just take what's given to you. And some of them didn't do well. And my feeling was, if I now have a mouth and a voice, I'm going to try to use it towards making sure other people aren't left without, what they've worked hard to earn. Sorry, I'm not sounding like an intelligent voice actor.
No, you
anymore,
absolutely
but
are. You absolutely are.
That was sort of became what felt important to me, was it's no longer about me trying to save my one little tiny morsel, but I'm going to try to change the conversation in general on behalf of others, not on a public scale, but just internal coding, internal conversations, internal memos.
Well, Kat Cressida, go forth and kick ass. It's a remarkable journey, and you are, you can deflect all you want when I say that you're a courageous lady, but I think this proves, a lot of people would have said, okay, I'm okay now. I'm going to take a breath and I'm just going to go back to work and keep my head down. The fact that you're sticking up for others, that you're making a difference, makes you special. So thanks so much for spending some time with me and talking about it.
Thank you so much. This was a tremendous honor. And Batman. And you. Thank you.
Thank you.